Today, I'm going to talk about one of the fastest ways to make major improvements in your singing outside of working with a top-rate vocal coach. This method might surprise you. Stick around to find out how. Hey, welcome to the Monique on the Mic podcast. I'm your host, Monique B. Thomas. This show is your go-to resource for professional and aspiring singers. Every Monday, join me for a mix of solo episodes and insightful interviews where I share real artist stories, practical strategies, and mindset shifts. Whether you're just starting out or are already on your journey, you'll find the tools you need to transform your vocal path and feel supported. I keep it real, I keep it fun, and it's always useful and up to date. Let's get into it. Anybody that works with me in private lessons knows that I require students to record and listen to their lessons as well as practice with them. There are so many benefits to doing this, and they are immediate. The first thing to note is that there's always a gap between how you think you sing and how you actually sing. Hearing the recording back for the first time is an immediate shock to the system because you are now face to face with this gap. And the newer you are to singing, usually the bigger the gap. In fact, the gap often is so wide that many get discouraged and give up altogether. It's the frustration of realizing we do not sound like our favorite artist. I'll address this a little bit later in today's episode. Another benefit of recording your lesson is that you get immediate feedback on what needs correcting. It's simply information on what specific areas need improvement in your technique. And there are two more benefits. You can practice directly with the recording because my handpicked exercises are in the right keys and in the right order for your vocal development. Lastly, you can get reminders by constantly hearing my voice telling you to pay attention to certain things. You can be sure that if I've repeated an instruction, there is a habit that needs correcting. But for those of you that study with me, you most likely know this already. Today, I want to talk about something totally different. The benefits of studio recording. This past week, I just spent 4 days with one of my artists who is mainly a songwriter that wanted to record his own songs. Damien spent 1 year taking regular lessons preparing for this session because he wanted to be proud of his vocals. The idea was to move him from being just a songwriter to being more of a singer. Here's what Damien learned and what you can learn too. Recording for longer periods of time will test your technique. Usually recording sessions last from several hours to several days depending on the project. The vocal producer, a role I have the pleasure of taking on, directs the studio session and makes sure to get the best singing out of you. Sometimes that means making you sing the same line over 50 times or more if needed. The better the takes are, the less magic, and by magic I mean editing, needs to be done by the sound engineer. Think of it as cooking. The best meals start with the best ingredients. So your vocal endurance is key, but not only. The vocal producer is looking for a particular sound at each verse, the chorus, the bridge, and ad-libs, and sometimes on one line or word. This requires that the singer has a technique that allows them to change their dynamic levels, tone, attacks, cutoffs, and so much more. Therefore, your optimal recording sessions are when you can execute whatever direction is given to you. So this first session will definitely let you know exactly where you are and how much work you'll have to do to become a better recording artist. Recording also tests your mental focus. Again, you can spend hours on end in the recording booth. Sometimes you're singing and sometimes you're waiting for the sound engineer to set things up in the DAW or digital audio workstation they're using to record the session. You might be ready to go, and at just that minute, something goes wrong with the mic. You'll have to tap in and tap out of that energy many, many times throughout the day. Keeping the right attitude when you have to repeat a take, even though you think the last 20 were fine, is so important. These things will also test your level of patience and your ego. I know that artists are sensitive. It is part of what makes great artists because we allow ourselves to feel more deeply than the average person. But there is a time and place for that. An example of where you'd need to keep your ego in check is when the producer is doing a comp. A comp means we're listening to several takes of a session in order to choose the right takes. We're composing, taking the best elements of your singing for the song. As a vocal producer, I need to choose these things fast, and I rarely am asking for the singer's input because I was chosen for that job. I'll often tell the engineer, I don't like that one, so they can quickly delete and we can move on to the next. That doesn't mean I don't like you as a person or as an artist, but rather, I don't like that take for the vision of the song I'm going for. You may or may not agree, but normally the vocal producer has the last word on that. And please keep in mind that you entrusted your vocal vision of the project to the vocal producer, so you have to let them do their job, or find another vocal producer, which could be costly and cause unnecessary drama. On a side note, that means you have to be very diligent about the team you choose, from the studio to the engineer and the vocal producer. You want to make sure that you love and respect their work so that you trust them to do what is in the best interest of the project, even if you don't agree sometimes. Recording is going to test your musicianship. You're going to need to have a great sense of rhythm. The producer might ask you to change the rhythm around so that it is more interesting. They might ask you to change some notes or improvise from the original melody. If you have a decent level of musicianship, these requests should not throw you off. Extra points if you have a great sense of harmony and can sing your own backing vocals. Sometimes a song may call for the lead singer to record their own backing vocals, which often requires stacking. This means you might sing each different part 3 or 4 times, and all of those tracks will be used to achieve a bigger sound. Just so you know, it is not often that recordings are done in one shot, which means that you sing a song all the way through and everything is perfect. Usually, one take might have great intonation and intention, but the levels might be off. Or perhaps the tone is beautiful, but the rhythm is rather shaky. While an engineer can fix lots of things in their editing or mixing, like intonation, it's harder to fix rhythmic inaccuracies and impossible to fix performance issues like your intention or energy. Ideally, you'll sing at least one take that has most of the right elements and sometimes all of them. Another thing you'll learn from recording is how organized and prepared you need to be for a session. You'll need to have worked out the keys of the songs, the technique, and the pronunciation of the song before you head to the studio to save time. Ideally, you should have memorized the song, as that makes it easier for you. You won't have to keep moving your head from the mic to the music stand to check out the lyrics. The better you know the lyrics, the smoother and more automatic your singing will be, and it'll make it easier to make changes in your singing when asked to do so. You'll need to print out formatted lyric sheets for the vocal producer and the sound engineer, which gives each line a number. This makes it easier to reference when working. I can say to you, for example, I have almost everything I need, but I'd like to rework lines 4 and 19. I think we can do a better job. It just helps to keep the producers' and engineers' notes for each part of each song very organized. What I've just discussed is clearly a more professional setting for recording. This is rather costly, and I'm not suggesting that you do that before you have your basic technique in place and that you have a real project in place as well. I am, however, suggesting that you learn how to use a DAW like GarageBand, which is free for all Mac computers, or Audacity for PC users, and there's other ones too as well, to record, let's say, a cover tune. I'll list an easy, affordable setup in the show notes. Here's what you do. You simply import your backing track and work on recording your best takes. In this way, you take on the role of vocal producer where you're trying to get the best ingredients for the project. You will immediately hear which things need the most work. Technique, nuances, pronunciation, rhythm, vibrato, etc. The more often you do this, the easier it will become because, let's face it, no one likes how they sound when they hear themselves back in the beginning. But this recording work will give so much more meaning to the work you do with your voice teacher. You'll understand the real why behind all of that hard work. It is to make your vocal performances as easy as possible. So here's a few takeaways from today's episode. Get a free DAW and affordable recording setup to start recording yourself as soon as possible. This will enable you to test your vocal technique as well as musicianship and performance skills. Getting prepared for this session will make the session go more smoothly and put you one step closer to becoming a professional singer. If the idea of learning how to record yourself sounds too daunting, you can either just use your phone, there's plenty of apps for that, or have a musician friend help you. Today, so many people have access to inexpensive recording equipment, it just doesn't make any sense not to record yourself at least several times a year. Remember, recording is necessary for all performing artists, although in the end, some people might lean more towards being a performing artist, preferring the stage to the studio. But we all have to start somewhere, and the sooner you get your performance reps in, the better. You will definitely be a better singer after the recording than before, so what are you waiting for? Oh, I almost forgot to talk about why we often don't like hearing our own voices when we've recorded. Firstly, we are usually comparing ourselves to artists with years, sometimes decades more of singing experience and recording experience. These artists are being recorded with $10,000 mics, $30,000 compressors, and in studios that cost $3,000 a day, and their sound is being mixed and mastered to perfection by some of the best in the world. Meanwhile, we hear ourselves back after having been singing for 1 year, being recorded on a smartphone with no reverb. This is obviously an unfair advantage, meaning these conditions are not comparable at all. So with that in mind, stop comparing yourself to Beyoncé, unless you could imagine what she might sound like after only 1 year of singing and being recorded by an iPhone. Fair enough? If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're really liking what I'm throwing down, you'll love my Mike Masters newsletter. For more information on how to work with me and to sign up for the newsletter, visit www.moniquebthomas.com or check the show notes. Musically, Monique.